Germany was collapsing. Across the Rhine, the Allies advanced through burning cities and broken farmlands. But one battlefield, somewhere near Cologne, would witness an act of defiance so bold, so improbable, that even German commanders refused to believe it at first. This is the story of a single American Sherman tank that stood its ground against an entire Panzer division, and won. By spring of '45, Nazi Germany was dying. Allied armies had crossed the Rhine, the Soviets were closing in from the east, and Hitler's once mighty Wehrmacht was now a desperate patchwork of veterans, teenagers, and conscripts. Yet, even in its final days, the German army remained dangerous. Its armored divisions, especially the formidable Panthers and Tigers, could tear through Allied columns if given the chance. The American 3rd Armored Division, known as Spearhead, was pushing deeper into the Rhineland. They'd seen every horror the war could offer. But what happened outside Cologne that morning was different. It wasn't an ambush. It wasn't a planned stand. It was 5 men against dozens of German tanks. Thick fog blanketed the valley. Visibility was barely a few hundred yards. Reynolds peered through the periscope, seeing only gray shapes and burned-out buildings. He keyed the radio. HQ, this is Courageous. Road looks clear so far. Continuing north. No reply. Static. The rest of their platoon was several miles behind. Ruiz muttered, "Don't like this, Sarge." Too quiet. And then they heard it, the low, rhythmic thunder of engines. Not one, not two. Dozens. The sound grew louder, closer, echoing off the fog like drums in the mist. Outlines began to form, massive silhouettes crawling over the ridgeline. Reynolds froze. He recognized those shapes instantly. Panthers. A full Panzer division, or what was left of one, was moving down the road. Dozens of armored vehicles, Panthers, half-tracks, trucks filled with infantry. If they broke through, they'd hit the American rear and wreak havoc. Reynolds did the math. There was no time to call in air support. No artillery. It was just them. 5 men. 1 tank. "Driver, pull us off the road. Use that barn for cover," he ordered. They rumbled behind the skeletal remains of a farmhouse, the Sherman's green hull blending into the smoke and fog. Sparks loaded an armor-piercing shell. "You thinking what I think you're thinking?" Reynolds nodded. "We make them think there's a whole company here. We hit hard, move fast, and pray they take the bait." The first Panther appeared, its long barrel cutting through the fog. It hadn't spotted them yet. Range, 800 yards. "Target locked," said Sparks. "Fire!" The Sherman's 76mm roared. The shell streaked across the field and slammed into the Panther's turret. A flash, then an eruption of black smoke. The lead tank of the German column burst into flames. Its crew scrambled out, screaming. From the enemy's perspective, they'd just been ambushed by hidden American armor. Sparks grinned. "One down," Reynolds barked. "We move." New position. "Go, go, go." Ruiz threw the tank into gear, crawling along the ridge to a new firing spot. For the next half hour, Courageous became a phantom. Fire, vanish, relocate. Fire again. Each shot came from a new angle. Each shell hitting another target before the Germans could pinpoint their location. They took down another Panther with a lucky flank shot, then destroyed a half-track packed with infantry. Smoke, fire, confusion. The Germans couldn't tell how many tanks were firing. To them, it sounded like a full company. Inside the Sherman, sweat dripped from every face. The air was hot, the metal walls echoing with the pounding of their own hearts. "2 left, Sarge," yelled Miller, counting shells. Reynolds looked through the periscope. More shapes moving, fanning out to flank them. "They're learning," he said quietly. "They're hunting us now." The fog began to lift. Now the battlefield stretched out like a painting of hell. Smoking wrecks, craters, burning barns. And coming through it, 6 Panthers, side by side, their cannons glinting in the pale light. "6 of them," Sparks whispered. "And we've got, 3 shells left?" "Make 'em count," said Reynolds. They lined up the lead Panther, aimed low, and fired. The shell hit the track, snapping it clean. The massive tank spun sideways, blocking the road. "Good hit!" Ruiz shouted. But now the others had them sighted. A German shell screamed past, slamming into the dirt just feet away. The shockwave rocked Courageous, showering the crew in dust and sparks. "They've got our range now!" Sparks yelled. Reynolds' voice was calm. "Then we move again!" They backed behind a small rise, just enough to hide their hull, but leave the gun exposed. Sparks adjusted elevation, exhaled, and fired again. The shell ripped into another Panther's side. Flames erupted. The Germans answered instantly. 3 shells slammed into the ridge, one glancing off the Sherman's front armor. The impact deafened them. Metal shrieked. The radio sparked. "Armor's holding," shouted Miller. "Barely." Then, silence. For a few seconds, both sides stopped firing. The Germans thought they'd hit it. The Americans used that pause to reload their last armor-piercing round. Reynolds squinted through the periscope. "Command tanks in the open. Take it." Sparks took a slow breath, aimed carefully, and fired their final AP shell. It hit dead center. The German Command Panther exploded, its turret flipping off like a toy lid. "Ha! That's for Bastogne!" yelled Ruiz. But their victory was short-lived. They were out of AP shells. Only high explosive rounds remained, good for infantry, not tanks. Reynolds knew it. The enemy didn't. Reynolds grabbed the radio, praying for a signal. Static, then a faint voice. "This is Spearhead Command. Reading you faintly. Identify, this is Courageous. We've engaged heavy armor north of Ettenheim. Need artillery support on our coordinates now." No response, just static. He slammed the radio. "Come on, damn it!" Outside, more German tanks regrouped. They were angry now, firing blind into the fog, tearing the ground around Courageous apart. Reynolds had one idea left. "Smoke rounds," he ordered. "Let's vanish one last time." The loader fired smoke shells in every direction. White clouds enveloped the field. Under that cover, Ruiz maneuvered the Sherman backward into a sunken ditch. They disappeared completely. Moments later, Allied artillery, finally hearing Reynolds' last transmission, began to fall. Shell after shell screamed in, raining destruction on the German column. The German formation broke apart. Trucks exploded. Tanks caught fire. Infantry scattered. The air was a storm of metal and dirt. The once mighty Panzer Division that had rolled confidently toward Cologne was now chaos and ruin. From inside their hidden ditch, the crew of Courageous listened to the carnage. "Think they're retreating?" asked Ruiz. Sparks wiped soot from his face. "If they've got any sense left, yeah." When the barrage finally stopped, the valley fell silent again, except for the crackling of fires and the groan of twisted metal. When American reinforcements arrived hours later, they could hardly believe what they saw. Dozens of destroyed German vehicles, tanks, half-tracks, trucks littered the landscape. And at the center of it all stood one lone Sherman, its armor scorched, tracks damaged, antenna bent. Inside, the 5 men of Courageous were covered in grime and soot, half deaf from hours of bombardment, but alive. They climbed out, blinking into the daylight as the reinforcements approached. One officer stared at the scene in disbelief. "Was this all you?" Reynolds shrugged. "Guess they didn't like Kansas hospitality." Word spread quickly through the division. A single Sherman had delayed an entire German armored column, not through brute force, but through courage, cunning, and sheer willpower. The German after-action reports later confirmed it. Their commanders believed they'd faced multiple American tank units supported by artillery. They never imagined it had been just one tank. For the men inside Courageous, the war would soon be over. But that day, that impossible stand, would become part of Spearhead's legend. When asked years later about that morning, Jack Reynolds simply said, "We didn't think about dying. We thought about doing the job. If we ran, others would die. So we stayed." That was the simple truth of it. No grand strategy, no orders from above. Just 5 men trapped behind enemy lines, making a choice to stand when every instinct told them to run. And that choice changed the course of a battle.